At a seemingly ordinary American high school, a quiet revolution begins with 6 simple words: "You can't do this." When top student Elijah Brooks is denied the chance to run for student body president, despite meeting every requirement, his rejection sparks more than outrage, it ignites a movement. Set against the backdrop of subtle racism, generational silence, and rising student voices, "You Can't Do This" follows Elijah's determined journey from dismissal to defiance, and ultimately to change. What begins as one student's challenge to injustice becomes a powerful story of resistance, identity, and the courage to lead when the system tells you not to. If you like the video and subscribe to the channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. Crestwood High School stood like an aging relic amid the buzzing sprawl of downtown Fairhill, Ohio. Its red brick walls and ivy-tangled windows masked the silent divisions that had endured for decades, the kind not written in rulebooks but coded into culture. Here, students passed each other in crowded hallways with smiles and fist bumps, yet the weight of perception and expectation never truly disappeared. It clung to the air like chalk dust. Elijah Brooks walked those halls with quiet confidence. A senior with a 4.0 GPA, a captain on the debate team, co-leader of the Black Student Union, and a national merit finalist, he had built a reputation on grace and diligence. He was the kind of student teachers loved, attentive, prepared, respectful, but rarely imagined beyond valedictorian speeches and scholarship essays. He was not, in most people's eyes, the kind of student who ran for student body president. Not because he lacked the skills, but because, at Crestwood, presidents had always been a certain kind of student, outgoing, popular, often white, and usually connected to parents on the PTA or district board. But Elijah had been thinking about this move for months. The school was changing. The student body was now more diverse than ever: Latino, Somali, Black, Southeast Asian, white. Yet the leadership didn't reflect that. Decisions about events, speakers, even lunch menus were made by people who didn't know or care about half the student body's experiences. Elijah wanted to change that. He wanted to make Crestwood listen. So that Monday morning he arrived at the main office just after first period, wearing his charcoal gray hoodie and black jeans, the strap of his leather backpack slung over one shoulder. In his hand, folded neatly, was his candidacy packet, completed, signed, and ready to go. His palms were a little sweaty, but his back was straight. The office secretary, Mrs. Klein, looked up and smiled. "Morning, Elijah. What brings you in?" "I'm here to submit my form for student body president." She raised her eyebrows, surprised but not unkind. "Really? Good for you." She took the form and flipped through it. "Looks in order. Hang on, let me get the principal's signature." She disappeared into the glass-walled office behind the counter. Elijah stood waiting, shifting slightly on his feet. Behind him, students drifted in and out, an underclassman requesting a nurse pass, a sophomore turning in a late permission slip. The morning announcements buzzed faintly from the intercom. He heard Mrs. Klein speaking to Principal Delaney behind the glass. Low voices, then a pause. Then the door opened. Principal Margaret Delaney stepped out. She was in her late 50s, tall, with a sharp navy suit and her signature silver necklace. Her face was unreadable, but her eyes locked onto Elijah's with a cool precision. "Elijah," she said, holding the form in her hand. "A word." She stepped to the side, closer to the hallway corner. Elijah followed, confused but composed. "This is about your application." She held it up slightly, then lowered it. "I know the deadline's this Friday," Elijah said. "I just wanted to be ahead." "Elijah," she cut in gently, "I don't think this is the right time for this." He blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I don't think this is the right position for you," she continued, her voice careful, precise. "I've watched you grow and I admire your academic achievements, I really do. But this is a highly visible role. There's a certain temperament and profile we expect in a student body president. Someone relatable to everyone." Elijah felt the words prick beneath his skin. "With respect, I meet every requirement listed in the handbook. My grades are strong. I've led multiple student groups. I've never had a behavioral infraction." Delaney smiled tight. "Yes, but there's more to leadership than a checklist." He looked at her, really looked at her. The way she tilted her head slightly, as though addressing a younger child. The measured softness of her tone. And then she said it. "You can't do this." Just like that. No loud voice. No anger. Just a verdict. Final. Sealed with a smile. Behind them, Mrs. Klein had frozen at the front desk. A junior, Marcus Patel, overhearing from the hallway, stopped in his tracks. Elijah's breath caught in his throat. I'm sorry, but why? Delaney hesitated. Let's just say I don't think it would be in the best interest of the school community right now. You're involved in a lot already. You don't want to stretch yourself too thin, do you? I can manage my responsibilities, Elijah said, his voice firming. Delaney gave a shallow nod, already turning. I appreciate your initiative, Elijah. But I'll hold on to this for now. She walked back into her office, the glass door clicking shut. For a moment the room was still. Elijah stood there, heart pounding, his form no longer in his hand. It felt like something had just shifted, like a fault line cracking beneath the surface of a place he thought he understood. Mrs. Klein met his eyes with something between pity and disbelief. Was that? Marcus stepped forward, brow furrowed. Did she just say you couldn't? Elijah didn't answer. He turned and walked out of the office, his mind racing. Not with anger, not yet, but with clarity. He knew exactly what had just happened. And it wasn't just about him. It never was. By lunchtime, the story had already spread across Crestwood High like wildfire. No one had caught it on video. Elijah was too composed for theatrics, and Principal Delaney had spoken just softly enough to keep her words from carrying far. But Marcus Patel had heard it. So had Mrs. Klein, who, though she said nothing aloud, hadn't exactly denied it either. And the words themselves, "You can't do this," were simple, unassuming, easy to repeat. Too easy. By fifth period they were echoing off lockers and whispered behind textbooks. Did you hear what she told Elijah? She straight up said he couldn't run. Why? Because he's not Crestwood enough? Some students were skeptical. Maybe it's just a misunderstanding, said Maddie Cole, a white junior on the prom committee. Like, maybe he missed a requirement? But that theory fell apart fast. Elijah was meticulous. Everyone knew it. He was the guy who printed extra handouts for group projects, who submitted essays a week early, who corrected teachers when they misread the syllabus. Politely, of course. I was there, Marcus said flatly in third period English. She said it like she was doing him a favor. Like she didn't want to embarrass him. It wasn't just the rejection. It was how it happened. The subtle condescension. The coded language. The quiet disqualification, delivered with a smile. That night, a group chat of BSU members exploded with messages. Tasha. Yo. Elijah said Delaney told him he's not the right profile for president? Amina. Meaning what? He's black and not loud. Tasha. Meaning she never expected someone like him to challenge their little system. Darius. This is exactly why we need someone like him running. Tasha Knowles had known Elijah since middle school. She was the kind of friend who would go to war for you, or at least write a very long, very well-reasoned email to the school board. She spent that evening texting Elijah nonstop. When he finally called her around 9 p.m., his voice was calm but tired. I'm not sure what to do next, he said. You're gonna fight it. That's what you're gonna do, Tasha shot back. You didn't do all this, grades, clubs, community service, just to get told to sit down when it matters most. Elijah hesitated. She didn't even raise her voice. That's what gets me. She just dismissed me. Tasha's voice softened. Because that's how they do it. That's how they always do it. They don't have to scream at you when they can smile while pushing you out of the way. There was a silence on the line. Then Elijah said quietly, I think I want to go public. Tasha exhaled. Then let's go. The next morning, Elijah walked into school like normal. Head up. Backpack over one shoulder. No big display. But by lunch, a post appeared on his Instagram account. Caption, I turned in my application. I followed every rule. I got told, you can't do this. So now I will. For everyone who's ever been told the same. Within hours, the post was shared dozens of times. First by students. Then alumni. Then local youth leaders. Some added their own stories of being overlooked, sidelined, underestimated. In Mr. Hamilton's history class, students pulled up the post during group work. She really said that to him? One kid asked. To Elijah Brooks? Man's probably the most qualified person in this whole school. Others weren't sure what to believe. Principal Delaney had a long career, a reputation for fairness. She'd been at Crestwood for over 20 years. But as more students began talking, a pattern emerged. Not loud, overt racism, but small decisions. Guest speakers that always looked the same. Spirit Week themes that ignored cultural holidays. Disciplinary actions that hit some students harder than others. It wasn't new. It had just never been challenged like this. In the teacher's lounge, the reactions were more muted. "Are we really sure this is about race?" asked Mr. Whitaker, the senior math teacher. Ms. Jensen, who taught English, replied, "If it's not, then why did she say he didn't fit the profile?" "What profile is that?" Silence. That night, Principal Delaney sat at her kitchen table, reading a growing thread of social media posts and news alerts. Her face was unreadable. She made a note to call the district superintendent in the morning. Meanwhile, across town, Elijah sat with his mother at the dining table. She was silent for a long time after reading his post, then finally looked up. "You sure you're ready for what comes next?" Elijah nodded. "They already told me no. What's the worst they can do?" She reached across and squeezed his hand. "You'd be surprised," she said quietly. "But I raised you for this." The waiting area outside Principal Delaney's office smelled faintly of copier ink and institutional floor wax. Elijah sat in one of the stiff plastic chairs beside his mother, Angela Brooks, a nurse, a former activist, and a woman who had spent her entire adult life reading between the lines. Angela was dressed in her navy scrubs, her hospital badge still clipped to her collar. Her expression was unreadable, but her body was still composed. Elijah glanced at her, his fingers tapping nervously on his thigh. "You ready for this?" she asked, not looking at him. "I think so." She nodded. "Good. Just speak plain. Let her show herself." At exactly 8 a.m., the office door swung open and Mrs. Klein offered her usual polite smile. "Principal Delaney will see you now." They stepped inside together. The office hadn't changed in decades. Wood-paneled walls, dusty school trophies, a framed quote from Theodore Roosevelt about daring greatly. Principal Delaney stood when they entered, extending a hand. "Mrs. Brooks, thank you for coming." "Elijah." She gestured to the seats across from her desk. "Please." Angela shook her hand briefly. "Let's keep this short." Delaney sat down, folding her hands. "I know there's been some confusion and I'd like to clear the air. My comments yesterday were taken out of context. I want what's best for Elijah and for the school community. That's always been my priority." Angela raised an eyebrow. "Out of context?" She leaned forward slightly. "You told my son he couldn't do something he was fully qualified to do, without citing a single policy violation. How should that be interpreted?" Elijah stayed silent for now, eyes trained on Delaney, watching. "I never meant to discourage Elijah," Delaney continued. "I simply wanted to advise him, privately, that this role comes with a high level of scrutiny. That it requires visibility, charisma, a public presence. These things matter in elections." Angela's mouth tightened. "You mean he's not polished enough? Not palatable enough?" Delaney hesitated. "That's not what I said." "It's what you meant," Angela replied coolly. "You said he doesn't fit the profile. So let's talk about that. What exactly is the profile of a student leader at Crestwood?" The room was still. The ticking wall clock seemed to grow louder. Delaney sat straighter. "Traditionally, the student body president is someone the entire student community can relate to. Someone accessible, outgoing, known by their peers. This isn't a commentary on Elijah's achievements, which are exemplary. But leadership is about presence." "And what," Elijah said, finally speaking, "do you think I represent that people can't relate to?" Delaney's eyes flicked to him, and for a brief second she hesitated. Then she answered carefully, "You represent rigor, discipline, intelligence, but not necessarily approachability." A beat of silence. Angela exhaled slowly through her nose, visibly restraining herself. "So let me get this straight," Elijah said. "You think I'm too smart and too serious to be elected by my peers?" "That's not what I'm saying," Delaney said quickly. "I'm saying that politics, even student politics, require a certain flexibility. You tend to hold high standards, Elijah. That can be alienating." Elijah nodded slowly. "Or maybe people like me only seem alienating when they're not expected to lead. Maybe what's really alien is the idea of someone like me being in charge." Delaney's lips pressed together. She shifted papers on her desk as though trying to regain control of the moment. This isn't personal. It feels personal, Angela said. It feels like a decision made on assumptions. And it feels like the first time someone challenged your expectations, you pulled back instead of leaning forward. Delaney sighed. He can still participate in leadership. There are plenty of ways. I don't want a way, Elijah said, his voice rising just slightly. I want equal ground. You don't get to quietly gatekeep leadership while pretending it's about qualifications. You didn't tell me I couldn't do this because I wasn't ready. You told me I couldn't do this, period. There it was again. You can't do this. The phrase that had ignited everything. And now it hung in the air like smoke, sour and undeniable. Angela stood. We're not asking your permission, Principal Delaney. We're here to inform you that we're moving forward. If the rules don't disqualify him, then neither do you. Delaney remained seated, her jaw tight. Angela turned to her son. Let's go, baby. Elijah stood, his shoulders square, and followed his mother out the door. As they stepped into the hallway, Mrs. Klein didn't speak. But her eyes met Elijah's and lingered, soft, uncertain, and maybe even a little hopeful. That afternoon, Elijah walked alone down the sidewalk toward home. He passed the school's bulletin board and paused. The sign-up sheet for the upcoming student council election was still pinned there, fluttering slightly in the breeze. He pulled out a pen and signed his name again, this time in bold letters. When he got home, he sat down at his desk, opened his laptop, and began drafting something bigger than a campaign speech. He was done asking. Now he was claiming. The video started with a black screen. Then Elijah's voice cut in, calm, steady, unmistakable. My name is Elijah Brooks. I'm a senior at Crestwood High School. I turned in my application to run for student body president. I was told to my face, you can't do this. Not because I broke any rules. Not because I wasn't qualified. But because I didn't fit the profile. The screen faded to a shot of Elijah sitting at his desk, in front of a row of his debate trophies and worn AP textbooks. No dramatic music. No jump cuts. Just honesty. I've been told to stay in my lane before. To wait my turn. To be grateful. But this time I'm not stepping aside. I'm stepping forward. For every student who's ever been told the door was closed, I'm opening it. Tasha had filmed it on her phone, edited it overnight, and uploaded it the next morning before the first bell rang. By second period it had 4,000 views. By lunch 12,000. By the end of the day, it was trending on local feeds, tagged in posts from nearby schools and retweeted by regional education advocates. Hashtag let Elijah run. Hashtag you can't do this. Hashtag Crestwood speaks. In classrooms, teachers tried to keep order, but students were distracted, buzzing. In the cafeteria, the vibe was electric, like a quiet storm rolling in. Groups huddled around phones, watching the video, sharing it again. Even students who didn't know Elijah personally were now quoting him. He said everything we've been thinking for years, said Jasmine Tran, a junior. That school only wants your voice when it's quiet enough not to shake anything. Flyers began appearing in the halls. Student voice is power. Rules is not equal to respect. This is bigger than a ballot. But for some, it was more personal. A group of black students, mostly juniors and seniors, gathered in the library after school, sitting in a rough circle. One by one, they spoke about moments they'd been told to be less aggressive, more polished, a better fit. One girl, Camille, broke into tears. I wore my natural hair to picture day, she said, voice trembling, and the secretary asked if I wanted to reschedule, just in case I regretted it. Nobody spoke for a few seconds. Then Amina said, this is why Elijah running isn't just about the presidency. It's about every time we got pushed back without them saying why. That night, a local journalist, Maya Cruz, who ran a small but respected online news site, messaged Elijah directly. Hi Elijah, this is Maya from Fairhill Current. I watched your video. I'd love to talk. I think what you're doing matters. Elijah stared at the message for a long moment before replying. Let's talk. Principal Delaney was in her office when the district superintendent called. I want you to walk me through exactly what happened, he said. I advised a student, nothing more, she insisted. You told him he couldn't run? I told him it wasn't the right fit. I didn't say he was disqualified. Well, that's not how the public is hearing it. Delaney's jaw tightened. He turned this into a campaign. He is campaigning, the superintendent said. Because right now the perception is that you're gatekeeping student leadership based on bias. There was no bias, Delaney snapped. It was mentorship. He was quiet for a beat. Then, you might want to consider walking this back. Before it gets out of hand. But it already had. By the end of the week, alumni were sending open letters to the school board. Local NAACP leaders requested a meeting with district officials. A petition circulated demanding the school revisit Elijah's application. It had 3,000 signatures in 2 days. Even a city councilwoman shared the video, writing, "Every young voice matters. Period." Inside Crestwood, students began organizing, not just to support Elijah but to question the systems that had long gone unchallenged. BSU hosted an open forum in the gym. Debate team members offered to coach Elijah in public speaking. Tasha printed voter registration-style flyers for the student election. At the next school assembly, when Principal Delaney stepped onto the stage to make a routine announcement, a wave of silence greeted her, thick, tense, deliberate. She scanned the room. Hundreds of students looking up at her, not speaking, not smiling. And then, one by one, students began tapping their desks. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythm. A refusal. A warning. She finished the announcement quickly and left the stage. Back at home that night, Elijah sat in front of his laptop, trying to process the whirlwind. Tasha sat cross-legged on the floor beside him, sorting through messages from volunteers. "You realize this is bigger than school now, right?" she said. Elijah didn't respond right away. He looked out the window watching the streetlights flicker on. "I didn't ask for all this." "No," she said. "But you're doing it anyway. That's what makes it powerful." He turned back to the screen. Another message had come in, this one from a group of students at another high school, offering to help canvass. He took a deep breath. Then he typed, "Yes, let's organize." The student handbook at Crestwood High School was 72 pages long. Elijah had read every single one. He did it one afternoon, sitting in the back corner of the library with a highlighter and a legal pad, while Tasha scrolled through archived school board minutes and Darius checked older versions of the school constitution on his phone. It wasn't just about protest anymore. They were looking for something actionable. A clause. A rule. A lever. And finally they found it. Page 48. Paragraph 3. In the event a student candidate is denied entry to the election due to administrative discretion, said candidate may appeal the decision through a petition signed by no fewer than 200 currently enrolled students. Elijah read the line 3 times. Then again out loud. "This is it." Tasha grinned. "A loophole." "No," Elijah said, sitting straighter. "A lifeline." The next morning, flyers appeared across campus in thick, bold font. "Student voice isn't optional. Sign the petition. Let Elijah run." Delaney said no. "We say yes." Tasha and Amina set up a table in the quad with a clipboard and a hand-painted sign that read #Let Elijah Run. Students lined up between classes, forming a quiet but steady procession. Even some who had never spoken to Elijah before walked up, looked him in the eye and said, "This matters." By the end of the school day they had 267 signatures. And it was only Tuesday. Meanwhile, Principal Delaney remained silent, at least publicly. Behind closed doors, she met with the vice principal, the district liaison, and a school attorney. There was talk of setting precedent, of maintaining order. But the reality was clear. The handbook rule existed. Her decision could be challenged. And the students had mobilized faster and louder than anyone expected. In her office, she stared at the rulebook and muttered, "They're building a circus." But it was too late. The tent was already up. Elijah hadn't expected the attention to grow the way it did. Every day brought new messages. A teacher from across town emailed him, "I showed your video to my civics class. We talked about what courage looks like." A retired Crestwood alum donated $100 toward campaign posters. A local bakery offered free cupcakes for his next petition event. But not all the messages were kind. An anonymous Instagram account posted, "He's just doing this for clout. He's not a leader. He's a victim playing hero." Someone slipped a note into his locker. "You don't speak for all of us. Stop dividing the school." At home that night, Elijah stared at the note in his hand. His mother watched him from the kitchen. "You all right?" she asked. "I'm fine," he said, but the edge in his voice betrayed him. She dried her hands and walked over. "They're scared, you know. That's why they're whispering." He looked up. "Scared of what?" "Of what happens when someone like you wins. When the excuses stop working." She sat beside him and placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "You're not just challenging a rule, Elijah. You're challenging a rhythm." He nodded slowly, and he kept going. By Friday they had over 400 signatures. Elijah turned in the petition to the school board office downtown, flanked by Tasha, Darius, and 2 student journalists filming the moment. It wasn't a protest. It wasn't a confrontation. It was something more powerful, a process respected, used, and owned by the people it was supposed to serve. The school board, now under mounting public pressure, announced a special hearing for the following Wednesday. A decision would be made. Elijah would have a chance to speak. "You ready to give a speech?" Tasha asked. Elijah exhaled. "It's not a speech." She smiled. "Then what is it?" He looked past her, toward the rows of students who had gathered outside the board building with signs and posters and clipboards. A statement. That weekend, Elijah barely slept. He rewrote his remarks 5 times. He practiced in front of mirrors, in front of friends, even in front of his old middle school teacher via Zoom. He didn't want pity. He didn't want applause. He wanted clarity and change. He wanted to show them that leadership wasn't about performance. It was about purpose. And on Wednesday, standing in the packed room of reporters, parents, students, and district officials, he planned to deliver exactly that. The school board meeting room had never been this full. Rows of chairs were packed with students, teachers, parents, reporters. Some stood pressed against the back wall or sat on the floor. Cameras lined the side of the room, local news crews, student journalists, a few streaming live on social media. The air buzzed with anticipation, like something sacred and dangerous was about to unfold. Elijah sat quietly in the front row, his hands clasped in his lap. He wore a plain black blazer, a crisp white shirt, and the pin from his debate team jacket tucked into his lapel. Tasha sat to his right, her arm gently brushing his. On his other side, his mother folded her arms across her chest, calm but unblinking. At the front of the room, the 5 members of the Crestwood School Board took their seats behind a long wooden table. Microphones, notepads, water bottles. And in the center, Principal Margaret Delaney. She looked composed as always, but there was a tension in her posture that hadn't been there before. She knew this wasn't her room anymore. The board chair, Mr. Caldwell, a balding man in his 60s, tapped the mic. This hearing has been called in response to a petition submitted by Crestwood High School senior Elijah Brooks, seeking to reverse an administrative denial of his student council presidential candidacy. "Mr. Brooks, you may begin your statement." A hush fell over the room. Elijah rose. He walked to the podium slowly, with the kind of steady confidence that came not from arrogance, but from preparation and purpose. He glanced out at the room, then took a breath. "My name is Elijah Brooks," he said. "I'm a senior at Crestwood High. I came here tonight not to prove I'm worthy, but to ask why I was ever told I wasn't." He paused. No sound in the room. Not even a cough. "I met every requirement to run for student body president. I turned in my paperwork early. I've led organizations, served on committees, represented my school in debates and district events. I've done everything that's ever been asked of me, and more." He looked toward the board. "But when I submitted my application, I was told I didn't fit the profile. That I lacked a certain presence. That I wasn't relatable enough." A ripple moved through the room, soft murmurs, quick looks. Delaney didn't move. "I'm not here to attack anyone," Elijah continued. "I'm here because I believe in this school. And I believe our leaders should reflect the people they lead. Crestwood isn't just one kind of student anymore. We're not all athletes. We're not all extroverts. We're not all white." That word, white, dropped like a stone in water. It made some in the room shift. Others stiffen. But Elijah didn't flinch. "I've been told all my life to be quiet, to be grateful, to work twice as hard to get half as far. And I've done that. But still, when it came time to lead, I was told no. Not because I broke a rule, but because I broke an expectation." He stepped slightly closer to the mic. "This hearing isn't just about me. It's about whether we are honest about what leadership looks like in 2025. It's about whether we want a student government that speaks for the school, or just about it. Because leadership isn't a performance. It's responsibility. And I'm ready to carry that. The silence afterward was absolute. Then applause. It started softly. 1, 2 students. Then a wave. Students rising to their feet, clapping hard and loud. Teachers. Parents. Even some board members. Delaney kept her face still, but her hands were white-knuckled against her chair. When the board regained order, Mr. Caldwell nodded solemnly. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. We'll now review the petition and determine if it satisfies the requirements for reinstatement. The paperwork was already in front of them, 421 student signatures. Verified. Complete. They didn't deliberate long. We find that the petition meets all formal requirements, Caldwell announced. And further, we conclude that Mr. Brooks was improperly denied the right to run. Therefore, we vote unanimously to reinstate Mr. Brooks as a candidate for student body president effective immediately. The room erupted. Students leapt to their feet. Tasha whooped. Angela squeezed Elijah's shoulder, her eyes glassy but proud. Phones were raised in the air. Reporters scribbled notes. Elijah stood quietly nodding. His face was calm but his jaw flexed. Not with relief but with resolve. As the room emptied and people spilled into the hallway outside, Elijah stepped into the crowd like he belonged there, because he did. A freshman stopped him. Hey, thank you. For real. Another added, you're already our president. Elijah smiled but shook his head. Not yet, he said. We still have to win it. Back inside the hearing room, Delaney remained seated as the crowd cleared out. She looked down at her hands, then up at the empty podium where Elijah had stood. For the first time in her long career, she realized the system she'd quietly upheld had begun to shift, and that shift had a name. Elijah Brooks. By the time campaign week began, Crestwood High had transformed. Posters lined the walls, but this time they didn't just feature smiling faces and empty slogans. Elijah's campaign flyers bore real promises. A council that listens. Representation. Action. Voice. And at the bottom in bold, #We can do this. His main opponent was Josh Daniels, a senior football captain, student ambassador, and a safe, likable candidate. Josh had been planning his campaign for months. He had faculty backing, a clean image, and knew how to work a crowd. But in the wake of Elijah's reinstatement, the election wasn't just a popularity contest anymore. It had become a referendum. I'm not here to tear down my opponents, Elijah said at the first student debate, held in the packed auditorium during fourth period. I'm here to raise the standards for what leadership can look like. Josh responded with grace. I respect Elijah, I really do. But leadership is about unity. We can't afford division. A few in the crowd murmured. Others stared. The word division didn't sit right, especially coming from someone whose campaign had never been questioned, whose right to lead had never been debated. Elijah didn't flinch. Leadership isn't division. Silence is. The week rolled forward with speeches, Q&A sessions, flyers, digital ads, and spontaneous hallway debates. But Elijah's campaign wasn't just words. He and his team launched an anonymous student survey, asking classmates what issues actually mattered to them. Cafeteria food quality, gender-neutral restrooms, clearer grading policies, mental health resources. He didn't promise everything. But he promised honesty. And follow through. Each morning he walked into school and was greeted like someone people recognized, not just saw, not just tolerated, but trusted. Still, the pressure was immense. Some teachers treated him with distant caution, unsure whether to applaud or remain neutral. A few even muttered to colleagues that things had gone too far, that it was just a student election. But everyone knew it wasn't just that anymore. This wasn't about posters on walls. It was about who got to lead, and who got told no before they even tried. 2 days before the vote, someone spray-painted across Elijah's largest campaign poster near the cafeteria. Know your place. It was the ugliest moment so far. When he arrived that morning and saw the dripping black paint across his name, the hallway was quiet. A few students stood nearby, unsure whether to speak. Elijah stared at it for a long moment. Then he pulled a Sharpie from his backpack, walked up to the poster, and added 3 more words underneath. My place is here. That photo made it to the local paper. Again. Election day came like thunder. The school buzzed with an energy Elijah had never seen. Voting booths were set up in the library and student union. Teachers gave students time during homeroom to cast ballots electronically. A few wore campaign pins. Others whispered nervously in corners, watching. Elijah didn't campaign that day. He wore no button. He gave no speech. He sat in the library between classes, rereading Baldwin on his tablet, trying to breathe. Tasha stopped by. "You okay?" He nodded. "Nervous." She grinned. "You should be. That means it matters." He looked up. "You think we actually did it?" She sat across from him, then leaned forward. "Elijah, you are the win. No matter what happens next." The results were announced at the end of the day. The intercom crackled. Students froze in their classrooms. Even Principal Delaney paused her email mid-sentence. The vice principal's voice came on. "After a record voter turnout, we are proud to announce your next student body president, Elijah Brooks." The school erupted. Cheers in the hallways. Applause in classrooms. Students hooped, hugged, clapped. Some cried. Others just smiled quietly, as if the win belonged to all of them. In the auditorium, where students had gathered with their phones out, Elijah stood stunned. He looked around. Dozens of students were rushing toward him, Tasha leading the way, laughing through tears. She grabbed him in a fierce hug. "You did it," she whispered. "You did it." Elijah closed his eyes for a moment, letting the roar wash over him. Not because he needed the noise, but because this time no one was telling him to be quiet. The Monday after the election, the halls of Crestwood felt different. Not because the paint was brighter or the rules had changed, but because something under the surface, something quiet and constant, had shifted. For the first time in the school's memory, the student council president walked the halls and everyone saw someone who had not just won a campaign, but earned a voice they were told they couldn't have. Elijah's name was on everyone's lips. But he didn't bask in it. Instead, he got to work. In the first weeks of his presidency, Elijah held a student forum in the gym, open mic style. No agenda. No prepared speeches. Just students from every grade and background, sharing what mattered to them. Over-policing of black students in the hallways, the broken HVAC in the arts wing, the lack of halal and vegetarian lunch options, the absence of mental health services. He took notes. He made calls. He scheduled meetings with administration and the school board. He even sat down with Principal Delaney. That meeting was awkward, tight smiles, clipped words, but he didn't go to gloat. He went with proposals, data, ideas. She listened, stone-faced at first, but by the end she nodded once. "You're serious about this," she said. "I was serious when you told me I couldn't," Elijah replied. "I'm even more serious now that I can." 2 months later, Delaney quietly announced she would retire at the end of the school year. No big speeches. No interviews. Just a memo sent to staff and a meeting with the district. She didn't mention Elijah's name. She didn't have to. Everyone knew this year had changed something. Local newspapers began calling it the Crestwood Shift. Alumni sent letters of congratulations. A neighboring school invited Elijah to speak at their student leadership conference. His campaign speech was archived in the city library's Youth in Action exhibit. But it was the smaller things that meant the most. A black freshman named Jordan started a poetry club and said, "I didn't think I could do stuff like this until Elijah ran." A Somali-American sophomore named Faiza ran for junior class rep and won, saying, "If they made room for him, they can make room for me." Even a white student named Owen, quiet and introverted, stopped Elijah in the hallway and said, "Thanks. You made it okay to be different and still want to lead." Elijah never called himself a hero. He made mistakes, missed deadlines, argued with board members, got overwhelmed, but he kept showing up. He never forgot the hallway where Delaney told him, "You can't do this." He passed it every day. And every time he remembered how it felt, not the sting but the resolve it left behind. Because what they meant as a warning he had turned into a promise. On graduation day, Elijah stood at the podium in his cap and gown, the gold tassel hanging low over his brow. His speech wasn't about winning or being right. It was about listening, about change, about legacy. He ended with one final sentence. "If someone tells you, you can't do this, I hope you hear what I did, that it means you must." The crowd rose to their feet. Not just for the speech, but for the fact that he had ever stood there at all. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.